Our guest today has spent her life listening to the wild, especially to the voices that are most often silenced. Camilla Fox is a pioneer of compassionate conservation, working to protect native carnivores and to show us that coexistence isn't a theory, it's a responsibility. This episode is about truth, the wild, unfiltered kind. It's about our desperate need for coexistence and the cost of misunderstanding the creatures who share this planet with us. But it's also about hope. About the people fighting on the front lines to protect the wild, to heal what's been broken, and to remind us what's still worth saving. Welcome to The Wild Edge, a mission-driven podcast exploring the pulse between humanity and nature, and the stories that reconnect us to the awe of our wildlife, and the lands all of us call home. We're more aware of the damage being done to the planet due to all these different things today than we have ever been. Yet we still are not, it's not changing quick enough.
For those of us in the trenches, it at times feels glacially slow. I try to take a step back and look at major movements of change, be it civil rights, be it suffrage movement. Those took decades. And it does feel slow. At the same time, I see pockets of change. I see the research that has been done and continues on animal sentience, emotion, intelligence, cognition, the things we're learning that I believe will ultimately inform changes in policy. I remain hopeful that with the right administrative changes at the state and federal level, we can sometimes see very quick change. So I rest on that. I see that sometimes with some of our campaigns that really can catapult once you get a movement going. We talked a little bit about the Cody Roberts issue with the horrible wolf killing in Wyoming and how similar that is to the Cecil the lion. I am a believer that things like that can propel very quickly a movement. And so there's lots of action emanating from that horrific story that did reach international headlines.
For those of you who don't know out there, Camilla, tell us a little bit about the wolf story. And by the way, you guys can go onto social media, YouTube, and you can see this video, which is horrifying, but you can also get behind the act that's going on right now to also get that guy put away.
And I do suggest actually on that point, Fairly, for people to actually see the visual because it is unbelievably heart-wrenching. And just to see the animal and mouth taped and the suffering and the people in a bar. And so I do feel like seeing it is important for people not to turn away from things like that. But Camilla, what were you going to say?
Yeah, this was a horrific story of a man named Cody Roberts in Wyoming who literally ran over a young female wolf with a snowmobile. And when most people hear that, they're shocked, but it's important for your listeners to know perfectly legal in Wyoming and Idaho to do that with wolves and coyotes. So you can legally run over one of these animals, and it's called coyote and wolf whacking, where it's actually a recreational activity. Just dumbfounding that one is legal, psychopathic. I thought I'll let you say that, but yeah, sociopathic, psychopathic, all of the above. And the fact that people actually do this as a recreation, I mean, that speaks volumes of what we are up against. But then secondly, that it's actually legal in several states. So as I mentioned, Idaho and Wyoming allow it for coyotes and wolves. In Montana, it's allowed for coyotes and foxes. And in fact, in 2019, we worked with then Senator Mike Phillips in Montana to ban this practice at the state level. And in the first committee, which was a natural resources committee, where you would think that something like this might have a chance to go through, it was voted down. So what that means is state legislators voted to continue to allow the legal running over of coyotes and foxes with snowmobiles and other vehicle. It's absolutely sick. And so this Cody Roberts, yeah, it is sick. It is. And thankfully, when most people hear about it, they are outraged and agree that it's sick. And so this whole incident with Cody Roberts in Wyoming, where he ran over a wolf, then brought that wolf in, maimed wolf, into a bar, duct taped its mouth, and flaunted the wolf in front of everyone. And as your viewers, listeners will see when they watch this on YouTube, and I also encourage to check it out, because if it doesn't outrage you to action, then nothing will. But he brought the animal in, flaunted it in front of everyone. There were thankfully a few people in that bar who were horrified. He then brought the animal to the back of the bar and killed her. Someone caught it on their iPhone. It got out to the media. Of course, instantly there was international outrage. Thankfully, that has propelled what I consider a growing movement to not only ban this horrible Cody and wolf whacking, but also to look at all the components that allowed for this. And I need to mention as well that Cody Roberts was fined ultimately $250 for that. Horrifying, $250 for that sadistic activity. And that manifests the fact that our state anti-cruelty statutes do not include wildlife. So most of our state anti-cruelty statutes just cover domestic animals. And those domestic animals are generally cats and dogs, certainly not domestic animals, farmed animals. Most species are not included. So one of the outcomes of this is that there is a growing movement to amend our state anti-cruelty statutes to include wild animals. So out of this horrific incident, there is now a growing movement to not only ban the coyote and wolf whacking, also to amend state anti-cruelty statutes to include wildlife, and really at the federal level to propel more protections for our wild carnivores. To me, that's exciting. It's like Cecil the Lion, where it's propelling a whole movement coming together, rallying in DC to call for change. Concurrently, there are several films that are coming out about wolves. I will mention that I feel like is all embedded in this, because some of these films will include this horrific Cody Roberts story, because it is so emblematic of what's happening to wolves. So there is a new film called the book, or the film is based on the book American Wolf. And that, I believe, is due out in 2026. And Leonardo DiCaprio is behind that as a producer. So my hope is that film, I believe the film is also going to be called American Wolf. Ashley Avis is the filmmaker behind it. But my hope is that these kinds of films that we so desperately need will raise awareness about these issues and help to propel this movement and systemic change at the federal and state level.
When I first met you, Camilla, I had never heard of this. I mean, I couldn't even imagine that there were human beings that could be this horrific and this cruel to host and put together and partake in killing contests of our wildlife, coyote killing contests. There was a squirrel killing contest put together, and I saw an email about it, and I think it came from PETA or something like that. And I was so outraged. It actually just freaked me out to the thought. I don't even know how to explain how I felt. It was, this furious and helplessness all at the same time, because you're thinking, how the hell do you get through to people? But the advert on social media for this thing said, kind of, come one, come all, bring your family, awesome family get together this weekend at whichever county. And by the way, this was promoted by the police, the local police. We're going to have a big barbecue. It's going to be a blast. Bring your kids. Let's see how many squirrels we can kill in one weekend.
Did you guys see New Zealand and the cats? Did you guys see that?
No.
Yeah. Yeah. A certain county was overrun with cats. and they had a killing contest with, there's children carrying dead cat. It was like, wow. But I feel like the disconnection, and part of it goes back to what we were talking about right in the very beginning of being connected to nature and being connected and realizing that we can be in nature and not have to rule nature, or be in nature and appreciate nature for what it is and allow other things to exist other than, humans. Camilla, what does your organization do to promote appreciation, respect, coexistence, problem solving, appreciation, love, all of that?
Well, just echoing what you both said there, I think, when we look at how we treat other animals with the extremes of things like coyote and wolf whacking and wildlife killing contests, we see that incredible disconnect. And those of us who do love animals see them as unique individuals with their own interests and amazing, wondrous selves. It's so difficult to understand how people can treat other animals this way. And so recognizing the importance of reaching people at a young age is something early on for Project Coyote. We said we need to emphasize this and we need to reach educators. So we have a program called Keeping It Wild, and it is about empowering educators with tools, resources, curricula, information they need to help instill and inculcate an appreciation for wild nature, for wild carnivores, for our interconnectedness with young people. Because I think so much of what we see is cultural. It's obviously different values and worldviews. But when you step back and you think about generations of people who have viewed animals this way and partaken in this killing, it is passed on. And until we intervene in that education at a young age and instill different values and appreciations for other beings, the cycle is just going to continue in my perspective. So we believe at Project Coyote that reaching young people and educators is incredibly important. And we know about nature deficit disorder, where young people who are disconnected from wild nature, just as you said, won't care for other wild beings and the earth if they haven't had that connection. So getting out into wild nature and having that experience of seeing a coyote, a wild animal, whatever it may be, like that to me is absolutely critical for how we shift that and how we ultimately get away from this embedded cruelty in our society.
And I think, Camilla, hearing you say that as well, I think that connection in nature also softens the human spirit to know that there's something bigger than ourselves out there in nature. And I think that transfers to how people treat people and how people treat themselves. So it really is a full circle, and it's free to go outside and appreciate nature. Just remind people
Parents
of that.
Hear that. I am so grateful for my upbringing that, just going into wild nature, and I would get lost just looking at insects and going to our local pond and looking at the frogs and literally I would just lose track of everything and get enraptured in an individual animal and just want to know his or her story. I believe that is in everyone at a young age, and it's tapping into that and fostering that appreciation and fostering that connection.
I was going to say, do you think that's something that's fostered by your parents too? Because mine, I grew up with horses and my mom supported that, and we had pet sheep and we had pet cows, and mom would go to the slaughter yard and buy potty calves and bring them home and rescue them. And we had rescue everything, kangaroos, you name it. But maybe that has to come from family too.
I think it's all of, I don't think it's just family, or it's got to be society. It's got to be our education system. Certainly, family is critical to this. I mean, I really do look at things like killing contests and the coyote wolf whacking. These horrific practices, I do think, are deeply embedded in families, in communities. Just as you mentioned, the police subsidizing this. I mean, so many of the killing contests that we counter are held within communities that make it a community event. So many of them are held at bars where there's jovial celebration before and after, and of course lots of alcohol imbibing.
Let's get drunk and go and shoot some animals.
And then your prize, is a high-powered rifle or a belt buckle or cash. I mean, I just want to mention too that these killing contests, because most people again are not aware of them, we created 2 films around them to raise public awareness. Maybe we can talk about the films, but I want to mention that these killing contests are not just belt buckles and a high-powered rifle, but huge sums of money. So there's massive contests in a number of states, but Texas, for example, has something called the Big Bobcat Fest. And literally, the person who kills the largest bobcat gets an award of $50,000, second place $40,000, third $30,000. I mean, huge sums of money. And again, the aim is to either kill the largest or the greatest number of the targeted species. And these targeted species are generally animals that have no protections from our state and federal agencies. So bobcat, foxes, coyote, squirrels, crows, so many targeted species, rabbit, prairie dogs, massive prairie dog killing contests.
Camilla, before we get into the films, can you share what power the average individual person has if they are listening to this and they live in an area where they know that there's killing contests happening in their area? What can the average person do to help stop or prevent these from happening?
So I am a huge believer in the power of grassroots and the power of community coalition building, working together. So since we banned killing contests in California was the first state to do it in 2014. We then formed a national coalition that has upwards of 60 national and state organizations working together to ban this practice nationwide. We have 10 states now that have banned killing contests. We have federal legislation to ban killing contests on federal public lands. So many of those bans have come from individuals contacting our organizations that are part of this coalition and saying, I'm learning about some killing contests in my backyard. What can I do? And so one of the things our coalition does is compile all those different killing contests that we learn about, which I must mention are largely unmonitored by our state agencies. So we don't even know the total number of animals that are killed, the total number of killing contests that are taking place across the U.S. But what we do know is that when we organize together, we can bring about bans. And that's often through the state legislature or through the state wildlife agency. So what I'd say in answer to your question, if someone learns about a killing contest, is to reach out to one of our coalition organizations.
Could they reach out to Project Coyote? Okay.
Absolutely. And from Project Coyote, we have a link to our coalition website. And then, make your voice heard. The power of letters to the editor cannot be understated. Most people are unaware that these are happening. So letting others know that these are happening, certainly writing to your state legislators, your commissioners, your state wildlife agency commissioners who are appointed by the governor in general. These are the decision makers that need to hear from individuals about what their concerns are and about these killing contests. Because as I mentioned, we have found time and time again that our state legislators and even our commissioners who ostensibly oversee management of state wildlife don't even know these are happening in the state.
Yeah. And of course, they have to be voted in. So your word, your voice is important to them. And, facilitating some of these things. It's really interesting, too, because I didn't even, there was a long time before I started connecting with you guys that are all involved in animal protections. I didn't realize that our voice was that powerful. And I think there's a lot of people that probably could be listening to this too, not realizing how powerful their voice is, and that one person can make a difference.
Absolutely. If I can share a little story about, how we started this whole campaign to ban killing contests, because it does demonstrate the power of individuals. So in I believe it was 2013, we learned of a very large coyote killing contest in Northern California in a county called Modoc County. And we researched more about this contest, who was behind it, who was sponsoring it. And we sent some individuals up there to investigate. And it was actually one of our supporters in Modoc County who brought this to our attention. And so for us, that led to a fair amount of research in the state of California about where these were happening. We formed a coalition around it. We petitioned our California Fish and Game Commission. We also brought to their attention that at the time, gray wolves were starting to come into California through Oregon and were protected under the Federal and State Endangered Species Act. And what we know is that individual wolves are often killed by coyote hunters. So we made the case that OR7, who became a famous wolf, also known as Journey, because this individual wolf traveled all over the West seeking a new home. We made the case that this wolf and other wolves were in jeopardy and in danger by these killing contests because so often individual wolves are killed by coyote hunters. So we petitioned the commission, and in that process, the commission accepted the petition to consider it into formal rulemaking. We formed a grassroots coalition and momentum of individuals coming to commission meetings across the state, expressing their desire to see these practices banned, writing to the commission. And we had a whole entourage of individuals that went all the way up the state, down to LA, to the different commission meetings, joining forces, getting just larger coalition, and realizing their power as individuals to speak their minds at these commissions, because every commission meeting, when there's a petition that's being considered, has to open that up to public comment so people can write, they can speak before the commission. And then they started to learn that, okay, I can also educate my neighbors about this, and I can educate my community and write letters to the editor. I mean, we had so many letters to the editor across the state. We started to generate media coverage, and individuals who had testified were interviewed. So again, the power of individuals, particularly with this process, cannot be understated. I want to mention, you asked what can people do, definitely signing up for Project Coyote's e-team, so that when we have these kinds of activities at a state level, we will be alerting you of, okay, we're considering a ban on killing contests. We're considering a ban on trapping. And here's what you can do. And we try to make those steps as simple as possible. But we've also had people who've come and said, I do want to educate my community. And so we have people who film or screen our film. We have a short and a long version of our film called Killing Games, Wildlife in the Crosshairs, which is about this activity of killing contests. We allow anyone who wants to show it to use it. So an increasing number of people are hosting film screenings at their home, getting their community members involved. And that's the kind of grassroots activism that I personally very much believe in. I'm a big believer in Margaret Mead's quote of, never estimate the power of a group of people coming together. They are the ones that, in fact, often make the most systemic change. So I know we often feel powerless and voiceless, but individuals in this arena really do matter. And that's how we foment change.
On May 22nd, 2024, more than 14 members of the House of Representatives introduced legislation that would prohibit these contests in over 500 million acres of public lands.
Yes. So Representative Steve Cohen in Tennessee co-sponsored legislation to ban wildlife killing contests on all federal public lands in the U.S. This would be over 500 million public lands that would be covered under this act. And so it would prohibit these horrific killing contests from happening on BLM lands and other federal public lands. So it's for us to get to the juncture where we have federal legislators taking note and more than 20 co-sponsors to that legislation, that means we've garnered momentum on this. And we're hopeful that, we'll get more co-sponsors. And again, coming back to what people can do, signing up to our e-team, we alert people to this legislation happening. We encourage people to write to their members of Congress and encourage them to co-sponsor this legislation. And that's how it ultimately happens.
And but that's because of you guys, right? I mean, that's because of you. It's because of all the people that you've been able to get together and all the supporters that believe in our wildlife. And because of all that, because of those individual people, this has happened. Correct. Is that right?
Yes. And I want to mention just the power of coalitions. Like, one of the things that has given me the most hope in my 30 plus years of advocacy is seeing how many organizations are coming together around these issues. And we have coalitions that are, looking at wolf protection on the East Coast, federally on the West Coast. We have coalitions specifically targeting wildlife killing contests. We have coalitions around reforming that agency I mentioned, USDA Wildlife Services. I mean, powerful coalitions, crossing different movements. So environmental groups coming together with animal protection movements. That to me is what excites me the most in this movement, is the power of people coming together. And I really do believe that more and more people are recognizing that that really is the way forward, is that we have to get out of our silos as movements as well and realize, okay, these are issues that we care about. We may have some issues that we're not exactly aligned, but we're going to be aligned on this particular movement. So if it's killing contests, we're going to stay focused on that mission. We're going to organize together. And that's how we've garnered, 10 states to ban the practice right now and have this federal legislation, and several other states that are considering bans.
That's fantastic.
And then it comes down to the individuals who are involved.
That's great.
Everything that we're talking about, we're going to make sure that we have a full list of links below in the show notes. So you guys can all go and sign up and become part of this, because I know every single one of you that is listening loves wildlife. Otherwise, why would you be listening?
That's right.
Just to give us a bad rap, probably. But you know what? Bring it on.
So Camilla, tell us about anything else about the films that you would like people to know about, where to find them, why does it matter, who can they share them with?
They're very good, by the way, because I've watched them.
Oh, that's great.
Oh,
I will watch them,
thank
Camilla.
you.
I have not yet, but I will.
Well, I will say I'm a big believer in the power of documentary films and also shorter videos. It comes back to our belief that public education and raising public awareness about these issues is absolutely critical, because again, so many people are unaware of the horrific ways that we're treating our wild carnivores and other animals. So big believer in power of documentary filmmaking. I got involved personally in documentary filmmaking many years ago, even before I started Project Coyote. I worked with a colleague to produce a documentary about trapping, wildlife trapping, particularly commercial and recreational trapping. And that film is called Cull of the Wild, The Truth Behind Trapping, available online for free. People are still using it in their trapping campaigns to raise public awareness. And then the second film that I produced is called Killing Games, Wildlife in the Crosshairs. And that was Project Coyote and many, many individuals involved in the production of that film. Again, it was done on a shoestring budget, but it's really been a vital campaign component for our statewide efforts to ban the practice. Go into a state, we show the film, we raise that public awareness, often have one call to action, asking people if it's in a state where we have state legislation to write to their state legislators, support that bill. If it's before the commission, contact the commissioners, ask them to pass that petition or rulemaking to enact a ban. Super excited about power of these films and these wolf documentaries that are going to be coming out that I think are going to really shift the needle on public perception of wolves, which will hopefully then promulgate policy change at the state and federal level. So then I'll mention too that after Killing Games, we were approached by a National Geographic producer who said, I'm interested in doing a sort of follow-up film to where you left off with Killing Games. Killing Games really focused on our campaign to ban killing contests in California. So he picked up from there, sort of followed me around in different states where we were working on bans, Washington State and otherwise, New Mexico. And then his film, produced under the film production company Comfort Theory, Wildlife Killing Contest, that was released a few years ago and again has been just seminal in raising public awareness.
Network and streaming today is really all behind biopics and, crime stories and all this senseless stuff. Documentary filmmakers that are working with conservation organizations and getting behind these incredibly, incredibly important stories that are happening. The way that you can support that is grassroots, what we were talking about before, is distribution now for many, many of these films is done through conservation organizations and even some corporations that are getting behind these stories and putting on events. I went to one the other night, and it just happened to be an email that came across my desk. It was, in support of not eating animals. It was a great film, and there was a lot of people there. It was awesome to see. And that's also a great opportunity to not just meet the filmmakers, but meet the people that are involved in the conservation organizations, hear specifically from them, support the work, and, meet the other people in your area that supports this too. And that always helps when you feel like you're not.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a wonderful way to bring community together. And, I just went to a documentary film in San Francisco with a film producer, also a film about not eating animals and getting away from big ag. But the community that brings together. And, I remember when we were doing our film screenings, I had so many people come up afterwards and say, not only thank you for producing this, but thank you for introducing me to a community of people where, that has been one of the things that I love about this work is that community building, because I am a believer that systemic change comes at the community level, grassroots organized. People feel part of a movement, feel they have a place in it. They don't feel alone. They recognize there are other people who feel the same kind of, whether it's pain and anguish over the way we treat animals in the earth. You're not alone. And you also have organizations like Project Coyote that can help empower you if you want to help be part of the solution. So yes, film does that. And documentary film production, I think, is just so important. So I thank you for your film production too, because I'm such a believer in it. Yeah.
Isn't there like 2 wolf stories coming out here pretty soon?
3, no less than 3 full-length documentaries coming out about wolves. I mentioned Ashley Avis doing the film American Wolf based on the book. I think could be a game changer for propelling policy change. I am reminded of Blackfish, which was such a powerful film to create change. And of course, that was picked up by CNN that then played it time and time again. So many people saw that film and so many celebrities. The list is huge for that. From a documentary film, got involved in a grassroots movement that led to significant policy change. And I love to use that film as an example of the power of documentary filmmaking.
Yeah, because that actually created, they brought in the Orca Protection Act, California.
Yes,
there is
in many other states. Yeah,
that is awesome. Another thing that I will throw in here right now is just a message to corporations, a message to business corporations out there is that if you align with the visions of people's documentaries and people's stories, then put your money behind it. Support them. And not just the support in getting the film made, because, as I said, we're not trying to get rich, but we do have to survive while we're making the films. Also, become involved in getting the film out there. Your Rolodex, right? It's probably dating me, isn't it? Rolodex. Business to business people, as well as everybody in your organization, invite people to these screenings and get everyone involved, because we can't do it without you, and we can't do it without that support. It's really a call out to all organizations. We all need to start coming together and working together. And it's not you over there and you over there. We need to come together as a community. And I think community strong, we can really continue to make things happen. I want to say this too, is I get it, everyone. There is nothing worse than losing your loved dog to anything, right? Especially when a coyote comes and jumps. My friend lost their dog. They live in Anaheim, of all places, right? Not far from Disneyland. He let his dogs out. Big old coyote jumped like an 8-foot fence, killed the chihuahua, and took off. Horrible, and I am so sorry. But there's coyotes in the neighborhood. So you've got to think smart and realize that animal is just looking for something to eat. You got to think of them too, and just be out there with your dog. Does it really take that much time to stand out there with your dog while they go potty or play for a little bit before you bring them back in? And we can all do that. We can make those changes.
Seems like an opportunity to mention our Coyote Friendly Communities program, because really, compassionate coexistence is doable in both urban and rural areas. And so much of what we see in terms of conflicts, real or perceived, are avoidable, the real ones. And it is, just as you mentioned, it is often about human behavior and what we can do to mitigate negative encounters. So those simple things of, when we're out recreating with our dogs, if we're out during pupping season, when coyotes are having and raising their pups, which is generally between April and August, being more mindful that the parents are going to be more protective of their den sites. They are not going to want off-leash dogs coming towards their den and disturbing their pups. So things like that are really important. And that's why we work with cities and communities to adopt proactive coyote coexistence plans, so that this kind of education, showing people of how, they can avoid conflicts, because most of the time they are avoidable. And yes, there are occasionally times when an unsupervised domestic animal will be taken, and it's heartbreaking. I mean, I cannot imagine losing my smaller dog, but I'm so mindful of when I'm out in coyote country, because I recognize that I do share the landscape with other animals, and it's my responsibility to make sure my dog is safe.
And also with land planning, Camilla, can you talk about that a little bit, of the importance of leaving space for animals to be able to move and live and exist without
no. I mean, so many conflicts that we see between humans and wild animals in the U.S. is due to human encroachment and habitat loss. So, taking a step back and looking at planning, looking at how we create wildlife corridors, looking at ways that we create overpasses and underpasses for wild animals, as LA has done so beautifully in the last year with the support of Annenberg Foundation. This is critical, and it does go back to planning with all the different infrastructure agencies and institutions, so that when we're actually looking at habitat modification and development, we're thinking about it with the fact that we share these landscapes with wild animals, and they're important to our ecosystem.
What I find just always so interesting is that when animals do not need to compete, probably like humans, like most of the time, hopefully we get along when we're not competing for things. And I see animals do the same thing when they're not having to compete for land or a food source. They tend to all sort of do their own thing around here. I will say before I say this that I'm not promoting this. My mother and my stepdad lived with us for a couple of years when we first moved here. And my mother is a huge, huge cat fan. And there was a a somewhat feral cat who's now living with her in Des Moines, fat and happy in a house. But she would put dry cat food out in our back, and we line up to a Corps of Engineer land conservation area, and we're in a somewhat rural area. And I looked out the window one day and I saw who's now named Talltail, the cat. So here's the dry cat food pile in our back. There's Talltail. There's 2 fox and an opossum, all eating out of the same cat food pile. And it's just funny. I see so many different instances. We have Camilla, I have adopted menopausal chickens here. So chickens that would be, they were going to be made into chicken noodle soup. And I joke around that, I'm not laying eggs anymore either, right? Just because of, and so they free range during the day, doing whatever they want. And then we have a barn that we put them in at night. But we'll have, coyote every once in a while come through our back, and then we'll have, an hour later, the chickens will wander, and then we'll see a fox. I mean, everybody just sort of does their thing. And in general, we lost a chicken to a raptor, and we lost one to some kind of a predator, another predator. But overall, everyone, as long as they have their own food sources and land, they do okay. I'm hoping that when people are looking at who to put in office, who to vote for locally as well as nationally, I'm always wanting to find out, do they support coexistence measures? Do they support land use plans for all? Do they? Absolutely. So I encourage people who are listening to get to know their local legislators and commissioners and whatnot. I think it matters. I think politics do matter. And I think that, as Camilla, you said multiple times today, how important it is at the legislative level for good policy to take place that can positively impact. I like talking about politics because I know that who we put in office is going to either hurt or help, typically, animals and land and our planet and clean water and all of the things that go into us thriving as human beings, hopefully animals and our planet thriving.
No, I will agree with you, Stacey, that, I think people should not underestimate the power of reaching out to elected officials and people who are running for office. City council members who came door to door with their door hangers, and I had an opportunity to talk to them and ask them questions about, their perspectives on sharing our landscape and our communities with wild animals. And, I was also suggesting that I want to work with them if they're elected to promote coexistence. But absolutely, I think from city council and local to board of supervisors to state to federal, ensuring that we get the right people elected and weighing in on that. People often feel powerless and voiceless. And one of the things we really try to do at Project Coyote is show you are not either. You have a voice. And with wildlife, it's critical to partake in these processes and help get the right legislators elected.
Because they can't walk themselves up and get a ballot.
Exactly.
No, but they should be able to.
I'd love to see a parade of animals walking into
Like, you have some pretty awesome ambassadors, too.
We do. We have fantastic ambassador. Are you thinking of Brian May with Queen, or are you thinking of Peter Coyote?
Well, all of them,
Queen,
including because I love her paintings. But I loved Brian May's video on your website. That was awesome.
I met him.
You did?
In Hollywood for that video. In fact, it was right around the time that we were banning killing contests. And I will share the story of Brian May that I got an email saying, how can I help? And then it was signed BRI, B-R-I. And I just forwarded it to our communications person. I was like, okay, I don't know if this is, whether I have no idea exactly what they want to do, but if you can respond. And somehow she looked at the email and figured out that this is Brian May and course, we sent him an email, enthusiastic, and then his return was amazing because then I got to talk with him and learn with his organization. Trust Me in the UK saves persecuted foxes and badgers. And so our conversation revolved around the fact that he was so impressed with the fact that we were advocating for the underdogs, is how we put it, the underdogs. And he's like, we are in the UK, my group is advocating for our underdogs, the foxes, the badgers. And then we got to meet in Hollywood around the time that we were showing our Killing Games film to raise public awareness about killing contests. And he was just such a delight to meet, and so real and so authentic, and so much in our camp on believing in animals and shared sentience and intelligence. And of course, he's brilliant as an astrophysicist. But yes, we're grateful to have him as an ambassador for Project Coyote.
I think we need to put a call out to all the musicians. Do you guys remember, We Are the World, when that was done?
Yeah,
of course. That was powerful.
I think we have to put a call out to musicians and artists and actors and get everybody together and do something like that. I think that would be awesome. A song for our animals.
Well, I'm going to take that one step further, Fairly. So over the last 3 years, I have lots of things in my... No. I did it. Oh my God, I should share it. But in my brain, I have things stored up that eventually maybe they'll come out and manifest into something. I would love to see wildlife concerts around the world, and that bands and musicians come together and support. The money's going back to support organizations that are supporting wildlife. So that's a dream of mine. Eventually, maybe it will manifest somewhere, but I would love to do that.
I want to work with you on that, because through Project Coyote's Artists for Wild Nature program, which Virginia Romero is part of, we will be growing that program over the next 5 years. And one of my goals is to bring a variety of artists together, and whether it's in one forum where we have poets and we have musicians, I think so much could be done. And I love your example of We Are the World, because what an amazing bringing together around one goal. So yes, and let's work together on that.
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
I love it. Okay.
We should seriously talk about this, because I have a whole, I can imagine all sorts of things at the concerts and visuals and the documentaries playing and items being sold and who to connect with. And I have a whole thing.
And artists, I do feel, and this is community and bringing people together in a shared space where they feel involved and energized. I love this idea. I'd love to work with you both. We have Dan Elster, amazing wildlife photographer, who just created packets of note cards with his gorgeous images on there, and he's giving a large percentage of his proceeds to Project Coyote. So those are the ways that we're going to be working with artists more who want to give back, and we want to feature their work. So all of our core programs that I shared with you, those have been since our inception, including our Keeping It Wild youth education and outreach program, but also our Artists for Wild Nature program, because I am such a believer that artists have a space and place. And if we can bring them in more to be part of our messengers with this and in these different mediums, that's just so important and an untapped, partnership. So
yeah,
I love it.
I ask people to just take a moment and think about the wildlife. Think not just our domestic animals and even our cattle and our sheep, and that goes into a whole other story. But, just think about their lives. Think about them as individuals. Think about the coyotes and the wolves out there that have families. And what do they want? Just for 1 second, stop and think, what is it that animal wants? It does think. It does think for itself. It's just like the females are just like women with children. We want to protect our children. If somebody came after one of our kids, we'd kill you. Why is it why is it such an awful thing when that happens when an animal does it? Same stuff. So if we could just have that moment of empathy and think about just the incredible lives they live, from elephant down to groundhog, raccoon, little raccoon with their little hands. And animals are incredible. And if you just give them a chance.
They are incredible.
And you just take a moment to observe, stop, look, and listen. And look up. I'm a huge lover of birds. And I feel like every time I take a walk and I look up, I see something magical up there, whether it's a hummingbird, a butterfly, whatever. So that comes back to the, spending time in nature and just being open and aware and taking it in. And then I think that just leads to appreciation and just leads to a feeling of, I am not above, I am not separate, I'm actually connected. And then when you really start to examine behavior and be open to behavior, you start to see, wow, this coyote family is not much different from my family. And wow, that coyote pair adores their family and protects their young. They're in excitement when they get together and they howl and they yip in excitement. I mean, what we know now through science, which is a lot of behavioral research and spending hours out there, is coyotes and wolves, for example, are not that different from us and highly social and highly intelligent, highly sentient, and feel, all the pain and have the same interests as we have. So absolutely. And that's why, to me, it's just so important of connecting with wild nature and connecting young people to wild nature.
Every podcast, we ask our guest, and we chime in too, on what wildlife film, documentary, would you like to recommend and why?
I guess I will start with what I just saw, which was very powerful. I realize it's not a sort of small screen or I will just say I just saw Billy and Me, which is the story of an amazing story of this man and otter. And, it reminded me of my octopus teacher. Mm-hmm. And I just thought it was so powerful, partially because it's out, in major streaming and Netflix. My hope is that lots of people will see it, because I think it just brings that element that we've been discussing of that individual relationship between a person and an animal, and what can be so magical about that if we are just open to it and we watch and we understand what they're communicating, what we're communicating. I mean, the interaction there with this wild otter is just phenomenal. So, I have so many documentaries I can recommend, but I just saw that. So that's top of my head.
It's inspired my husband and me to go to Shetland.
Nice.
We're like, we want to go.
I'm sure lots of people.
Yeah, I love it.
I want to go right to that spot.
I'm just going to sit there and wait for Molly. Okay, so real quick, my favorite documentary over the last 2 weeks, I read a book, Diet for New America, when I was 18, and it changed my life. John Robbins, there's a documentary out. He's one of the heirs of, would have been one of the heirs of Baskin-Robbins. Documentary is called Love Over Money. Tells his life story. Fascinating. I am forever indebted to him for changing my life around animals at that age. And I never looked back. And I learned about the cruelty of animals in factory farming, the environment, health. But being from Iowa, especially, when I was 18, it was something, talk about community. So that book changed my life. And I love seeing his documentary about his life and his trials and tribulations within his family, and not going the dairy route, and the disconnect them with his dad, and how his, everybody will have to watch I'm just super grateful. Yeah. So I was happy to see his life highlighted, because he's done so much for so many, including so many millions of animals.
I went to a showing here at the Westwood Theatre. It was called Humans and Other Animals. Locally produced, really takes an in-depth look into our sentient creatures that are being farmed. It's mostly about farmed animals. But yeah, realizing that these animals have feelings, and it's scientifically proven now. So next time you want to dig into a big piece of meat, just remember that. But humans and other animals, really good. Definitely got to be on your playlist.
Awesome.
So
I just want to say that's the one that I just saw in San Francisco as well. And with Mark, the film producer, director, and phenomenal. So that second shout out for that one. And that book for me too, along with Francis Moore Lapay's Diet for a Small Planet.
Camilla, anything you would like to say before we wrap this up?
I just want to say for all those who are listening and want to get involved, please check out our website, projectcoyote.org. Sign up for our e-team. And as I mentioned, all these issues, we alert people when there's opportunities to speak out, to get engaged. So we hope you'll check us out, join our e-team, and join our community of compassionate advocates.
And I'm going to make sure all of those, Stacey and I make sure all of that is in the show notes as well. So you can get in touch with Project Coyote because they are incredible. The work they are doing is awesome. And we really need to look after our little carnivore critters out there.
Yes, we do.
People.
And thank you so much, Camilla. You and your team have done just incredibly creating life-changing movements for animals and human communities. And since all of the animals can't directly pop in and say thank you, I will say thank you on behalf of all the animals that you have helped.
That is awesome.
So much.
We'll let you know further about what happens with our music, our new song that's going to come out.
I'm excited, actually.
The wildlife version of We Are the World.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Coexistence isn't some faraway dream. It's happening right here. Right, often just beyond our fences or under the same sky that we're sleeping beneath. Truth is, our wildlife, our animal neighbors are still out there trying to live their lives, raise their young, and survive in this shrinking space we all share. They don't need our fear. They need our understanding. They need space, respect, and a voice. Wherever you live, whether it's a city block, a desert canyon, or the edge of a forest, look around, listen, learn who your wild neighbors are, and do one small thing this week to protect them. Because when we protect wildlife, we're also protecting ourselves. The air we breathe, the water we drink, and the wildness that keeps our hearts beating. I'm Fairly Arrow, and thanks for listening to On the Wild Edge. Also want to shout out, thank you Stacey James from Dazzle Africa for joining me on this episode. If this story moved you, share it. And join us in protecting our wildlife, our wild spaces, and the fragile balance that makes this planet home. See you on the next one.